Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Pfluger with We Wonder. We are excited today because it is a holiday week, or at least it's approaching a very big holiday weekend. And again, it's actually, July 1st, the first day of the third quarter. And the exciting part about that is the second quarter is over for all of us, right? So everybody, got shocked at the end of the first quarter. The second quarter has been tough for a lot of folks out there, so we definitely want to acknowledge that. But the interesting part about it for We Insure was that insurance itself is always in demand. So we've actually had a spike over that period of time of interest, both in the franchise aspect of what we do, but also people are asking a lot of questions on how we do what we do and why the model is so disruptive and unique in the business. And that's what we're here today to talk about. So as we celebrate that, and the second half of 2020 is going to be fantastic for all of us. We're celebrating Independence Day, and my question for most of you out there is, how are you celebrating your independence? Right? Are you with you're with a carrier that only has limited number of products and services, and so you're out there quoting all of these people and only able to bind 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 because you don't have the right products. And I know that doesn't feel good, right? Talking to a lot of clients, friends, family. Ron's got a great story about that coming up, but it is an interesting perspective when you have limited options out there. So we're inviting you to take a look at We Insure and also to celebrate your Independence Day coming up. So let's talk a little bit about how we can do that. And again, welcome to We Wonder. All right. So today we have two special guests. They both work for us here, come from very, very different backgrounds at We Insure. Pete Crow is our Chief Revenue Officer. Welcome, Pete.
Good morning. Good morning. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. I'm enjoying the wonderful weather down here in Florida at 7,000 degrees. So it's right for me. So I'd love to do that. The other part about that is, Pete comes from a different background than Ron does. We also have Ron Caravella, also known as the Insurance Fellow, and two different backgrounds. So I'll let you guys introduce each other. Just a quick bio, and we'll get started.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Chris. Morning, everybody. Welcome to We Wonder. Glad to have you on. Excited to talk about We Insure and really the carrier access. As Chris said, Ron and I work very closely together at We Insure, but again, coming from different backgrounds. I got a strong background on the technology, marketing, and strategy side of the house, working with some Fortune 500 companies and even another large franchise organization as well. And fantastic to be part of the team at We Insure as we expand across the country. But I'll turn it over to Ron, the insurance fella, to talk about his background, especially on the insurance side, which I think all of you guys will find incredibly helpful today.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Chris, for having me on. Welcome, everyone, to We Wonder. And, my background really comes from the insurance space. Before insurance, I was a banker. But when I went into insurance, there was two choices I had. And we're talking about 15 years ago when I entered the insurance business. It was the captive world or the independent world. And all I knew was that I wanted to make sure that my clients had choice. So I went into the independent world. But, I soon discovered that even in the independent world, there was differences, right? There was different carrier accesses, different operational efficiencies that were available to other organizations that me, as a true independent, small mom and pop agency, just didn't have. And so that's why 7 years ago, I was blessed to be able to buy a franchise from We Insure and then join the We Insure team, corporate team, 6 years ago. And to this day, I think one of the facets about my insurance life that I really love is that I'm both on the executive side with We Insure, but also still a current franchisee. So I can bring a unique perspective, as Pete and Chris said, to this conversation.
That's great. Thanks, guys, for the intro. And, I think we've all discussed this in the past, the limitations that insurance really has, whether it's, people are saying, well, you can go online and get your auto insurance. You can, but at the end of the day, you don't have anybody really walking you through the process. And how many of us as lay people understand what we just signed up for? Hey, we got the cheapest option until we have an accident. We don't have all the right coverages, or nothing is actually covered. Here's $150 back or $1,500 back. And by the way, it's $3,000 in damage or $8,000 in damage, and you don't have the right things that you needed. It gets far more complicated when you go into your home because there's no VIN number on your house. And so you have to make those determinations to make sure you have the right coverage. God forbid there was a flood or a hurricane or a hailstorm or anything else. A sinkhole, could be anything. And you have the wrong coverages. And they said, oh, remember when you said you saved that $50 last year? You don't have that coverage. That's a mistake you don't want to be making for you or your family. So that's one of the things, the true advantage of having someone who's actually there to discuss it and consult with you. And this hybrid model that we put together that has both the most access and the consultative approach at the same time really benefits both the consumer and the agency owner who decides to be part of WeInsure. So let's talk a little bit about that. And really, one of the things that I've noticed personally was I had a lot of situations where in the past where I had to go find new insurance, even in Colorado, where you would think that there's no issues on an ongoing basis. We do get some hail and some other storms that come in, and it raises the price for everybody in the state. Even though I didn't have a claim, right. I have a 20-some% increase, and then I have to go shop different carriers because I'm with a State Farm and Allstate, of farmers who only have 1 or 2 products to offer, and then I'm the guy doing the shopping, right? And as a consumer, I don't even know what I'm shopping for and how does this work. And with WeInsure, we don't have that problem. Right now we're moving nationwide and we have the ability to disrupt an entire industry and bring that value to all the clients across the nation. So that is the good part about it. But the real competitive advantage that we have, gentlemen, is the carrier access, right? So if you talk to someone who is on the insurance side, they're going to say, hey, I have limitations, even if I have to go get it with the carrier and they won't appoint me. Or, hey, in this part of town, in this part of the state, there's only 3 carriers that will actually operate. Really, there's 12, but you didn't even know the other ones existed because they don't deal with you. And so that's what consumers need to understand, is that we have all those options. And so that's what we're here today to talk about, is that competitive advantage. And I know both of you work very, very closely with all of our carriers. The access in the state of Florida and in all of the new states that we're going into, how that process works, and why it's so beneficial. And again, there's different tiers of commissions. There's a lot of things we're going to touch on today. So this is awesome. So I would say the first thing I'd like to ask is, how do we cultivate, carrier relationships at WeInsure?
So, Pete, I'll go ahead and start with this one here. And really, how we, from a carrier perspective, I'll start with this. One of our national carriers about 7 years ago was meeting with us and said, our organization has done a study and realizes that each carrier visit to an agency, right? Anytime a carrier rep steps foot into an agency, it's costing them hundreds of dollars. I believe it was close to $500 per visit, right? When they take into account the total cost. And what this rep told us was, we really love the efficiencies of working with WeInsure, because with one visit to your office, we can touch literally 100 offices. And so from a carrier perspective, there's just so many operational efficiencies that are present for them working with an organization like WeInsure, getting information out effectively. And so, and even when it comes to even simple things like servicing, there's something that sounds as simple as servicing or commission paying, right? One full commission check goes to the accounting department, and the accounting department WeInsure is the one who does all the backhand accounting. On the service side, right, they can push all the underwriting memos and any kind of service requests to one centralized location. And so carriers look at something like this and say, hey, you know what, just from the beginning, working with a company, an organization like WeInsure just helps us operate more efficiently. Thus, profitability is generally higher working with an organization like us.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ron. I think, what I've seen, especially from those national carriers, is we're an incredible feedback loop for them as well. And by that is, obviously they're bringing us a lot of product and commission structures as well, which we can get into, Chris, later. But at the end of the day, to your point, we've got these incredible agency owners out there, and they're telling us, hey, what products are competitive in the market? What's happening in the market? What are clients asking for? How are they being communicated to? And us bringing all that information back to those carriers. So again, to your point, definitely a very beneficial relationship and environment for those carriers to be working with one central location, like Ron said, and us going out and collecting all that information for them to make the product better for the client. And again, that's just going to make our agents more competitive in the market at the end of the day.
That's great. And that's one of those things. Sorry, there's a little bit of lag on that. I apologize. And it is important to have those access points. But Ron, you mentioned it just a little bit there. So let's talk about that since you touched on it. Was kind of are there different tiers, of commission for carriers? If you're an insurance professional, are you looking at different tiers? Are you, do you even know there's extra tiers in there?
Chris, great question, because I think with many agents, they don't even realize that there's different tiers of commissions being paid out, right? And with We Insure, again, I mentioned the operational efficiency. So from basically a starting point, there's an incentive for a carrier to work with us, right? Because it's going to be ultimately more profitable just from the cost savings on different various things. So as a result, typically, we're at higher commission levels. So a great example is one of our national carrier partners. There's different what they call pathways, tiers to partnership, and it starts at tier 1, which is the lowest commission level, which actually, and just to throw out a commission there, it's 10%, right? And tier 4 bumps you all the way up to 15%, So now all of a sudden here you are with an organization like We Insure, which from day one, when you join an organization like We Insure, when you join We Insure, you're at tier 4, which is 50% more commission, right? Than you're going to get on your own. So right then, as a carrier, they already recognize that it's profitable to work with We Insure. So we're going to start everyone off with We Insure at a higher commission. But as a franchisee, speaking from the franchisee's perspective, from day one, I was able to reap the benefits of that book of business and that profitable relationship that We Insure had built years before I even joined the organization. So I reaped the benefits of that. And to this day, that's one of the biggest benefits I think that our agency owners receive. It's not just, Pete, we talk about this all the time, right? It's not just the carrier access. That's great, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But coming from a purely commission side, you're starting off at highest commission tiers with most of our carriers.
Yeah, I mean, again, when we talk about that product and the carrier access, I mean, again, if you put your marketing hat on, you think about, hey, one, you got to have a great product, but really, I think in insurance, it's about products. You have to have really that whole suite of products. It's almost like the Amazon effect. We're so used to now going out there and seeing all these different options and all these different reviews. But in the insurance, it's no different, except for there's not a lot of transparency out there. When you as a consumer go try to shop for insurance, and let's say I call Chris Fluger to try to get my insurance, I'm not the wiser if you have 3 carriers or if you have 150 carriers, right? And that's a disservice to that client. And so for us, that carrier access is so key to make sure, again, that those agents out there can help 9 out of 10 our consumers, clients. And at the end of the day, to Ron's point, they're going to get paid for it, right? That highest tier commission. So they're going to get a return on their investment going out there trying to capture that consumer, to have the right product for them. And oh, by the way, now you're going to get the highest tier commission. So all those things that line up. And as Ron said, on day one, which again is just really unheard of in insurance. And again, I think the beauty of the We Insure model.
I think a lot of people are surprised by that too. A lot of people that are in the insurance industry, and Ron had mentioned it, are surprised, when we have conversation with them, that there's that many levels involved, even with carriers they've worked with for years, because they're just not that tied in, and they just don't have that type of relationship with most of those carriers as we do. And so that's the part I think was always eye-opening for me as well.
The importance of choice, as an actively writing agent, I see this every day. And I'll tell you, I'll share a quick story with you from last week, and it just happened last week. And we'll talk a little bit more about Florida and what a difficult insurance market Florida has been. But the truth is that's expanded nationwide. And we'll, there's a variety of factors that we can go into, but writing insurance and the carrier choice out there, it's becoming more and more difficult. So, a real life story, I had an insured who called me and said, hey, you know what? My neighbor referred me to somebody and they gave me a quote that's a little bit less than my renewal that's coming up with you. But can you review this for me? And number one, I always try and make sure that my insureds have that relationship with me, that they can call me, even if it's bad news, they can call me. And so this insured calls me and says, this is what I have. You're my trusted advisor. Can you advise me and tell me what's going on with this policy, this new quote that this agent gave me? And I looked at it real quick and I said, this is, Chris, I think you mentioned this about knowing exactly what the coverages are, right? So I looked at that policy and I said, listen, first of all, you don't have replacement cost on contents. Do you know what that is? No. I explained that to him. Basically, I said, if you have a fire, your couch will be at depreciated value as opposed to replacement cost. So rather than maybe $4,000 to buy that new Lazy Boy couch, you're only going to get $1,000. And he said, whoa, that in itself should have been enough, right? Then I turned around and said, guess what? You remember that? You remember we talked about that service line endorsement, and that means if the sewer line that's in your yard, so the utilities won't touch that because it's in your yard. Insurance doesn't cover that typically because that's not under your dwelling. You know that service line endorsement that we talked about? Now all those utilities in your yard are covered, right? He said, oh yeah, that was great. I love that when we talked about that last year, right? And I said, well, this policy doesn't have that. Right. And so, again, there was a number of different endorsements that are on the policy that gave our policy more value. Again, this goes back to what we talk about, the power of choice. Right. You're going to always have, not everybody needs every endorsement. And the beautiful thing that I can speak very confidently as an insurance professional to my clients, because I can give them the exact product that they need, not try and force them, forcing a round peg into a square hole, right? And I think that's what happens many times when you go to an insurance agent that just doesn't have the options that I have, that We Insure has.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I've had that come up, coming from the real estate side prior to, we've talked to a lot of different folks that were agents or owners that were referring to one particular source. And they would say, man, every time I'd send it over to my Allstate guy or my State Farm guy, or you fill in the blank, he goes, they'd come back and people would say this was 30% more. So I had to go with someone else. And they don't tell you that, but they look at you going, did you really refer me to the right person, or just some guy that, they're wondering what's going on behind the scenes, as opposed to doing the right thing for the client. And so that's one thing that, we can definitely take off the table with We Insure, is the fact that, we have all the options out there. And so, in the state of Florida, I guess that's one of the questions, for you guys in the state of Florida, where We Insure started, before we did our national expansion campaign, how many carriers are we talking about? Are we talking about 15 or 20 people, or are we talking about a lot of carriers?
Yeah, great question. We in Florida, we have over 150 carrier relationships. And in a state like Florida, where there's a lot of flux and it's a very fluid insurance market, that's very, very important. Now in other states, we don't need to have 150 carriers, right? But even as we are expanding, Pete and I talk with our products team all the time, and as we go into other states, it's funny. We're new into these states, but yet we still have more carrier access in many cases than many of these existing agencies even have, right, Pete?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think too, when it comes down to that, we talked about, for Chris, you kind of alluded to it, even your personal situation, a rate goes up and suddenly what are you going to do? You're going to stay with that agent. I think a big thing for us, really a mantra We Insure, is about, being that agent for life. And so, hey, when you call me as a We Insure agent, you never have to call anybody else, right? And I know some of our top agency owners really believe that and push that. And the reason being is we have that market access, that carrier access. Ron said, especially in Florida, having access to 150 different carriers. If there's you have a catastrophe loss, whether it's flood, it's hurricane, maybe your rates could go up 30, 40, 50%. And so from that side, hey, what are some other options that are out there? And it's no different in other states. You're going to get flood in some states, hail in other states, maybe a tornado, being able to have access. So if there's those catastrophes or any other kind of situation, you're going to have access to all those products. So as Ron said, for us, I mean, obviously we've got some so strong relationships down in Florida, but now we've expanded those out nationally as well. So access to, numerous carriers across the country.
And so you mentioned the national expansion. So a lot of people have that question: what's it look like if I start up in Arkansas? What's it look like? And if I start up in Delaware, I start up in Ohio, what does that look like? I won't have 150 carriers. Is that a bad thing?
No, it's a great point. I mean, every market's going to be different, and so from our side, we're going to make sure you have the carrier access to make you the most competitive. And so for us, especially go up the Eastern Seaboard there, we've got access to all those carriers. They're going to cover, again, anything close to the water. As we go into the Midwest, into the West, there again, it's fire, it's hail, whatever it may be. We're going to have access to those carriers. So normally what we'll do is, obviously we've got our national relationships with the big national carriers that, day one, you're going to be on board with. And then as you come on board with We Insure, then we always analyze your market down to that very kind of super regional level and say, what else do you need? What do you need to be competitive? And then we'll go in one by one with you and make sure, especially if you're writing a lot of home or you're running a lot of auto, depending on what you're writing then, and making sure, again, you've got that arsenal of carriers ready to go. And so again, day one, you can write and be as competitive as possible in your market.
I think, Pete, Chris, you mentioned about going into other states, and in this one state in particular, Pete, myself, and our products team were on the phone with agency manager, and this particular agency manager worked at another agency that's been in business in that state for many, many years, and turns around and says, "Wait, you give us access to Progressive?" And I turned to myself. I turned and I said, "You don't have access to Progressive?" And he says, "No, I don't." And it was funny because we've got a great relationship with the national carriers like Progressive, but we spoke to Progressive before, and with this particular agent, they said, "Yeah, we definitely want to work with this particular agency." So it's funny because day one, this particular agent is going to have a carrier that he never had working with another established carrier. Now, but Pete mentioned, there was some regional and super regional carriers as we move into other states that we need, and that we work with this particular agent. We're working with them to make sure that we get some of the regional and super regionals that are needed. But the beautiful thing is we're entering into these states with these powerful national relationships, and I think that's a big thing. Gentlemen, that we definitely want to make sure that our audience understands the power of national relationships. No matter where we're here in Florida, and the way that most carriers look at us is, if you can succeed here in Florida, you can really succeed in other states. And this is something that I've been told personally by many carrier reps. So we've proven that this model works. We've proven that we can be profitable. And so as we move into other states, that's a big advantage for our franchisees as they join us.
Yeah, Ryan, that was a good example. I mean, that situation we had, within the last 2 weeks or so. And I would say this, I think that producer and agency owner was just so excited about even the commission structure, in terms of coming in. One was that access to product, but was that commission structure as well. I think at the end of the day, he was getting, after he had to do his sharing with the agency, about 4%. From one of those national carriers, whereas with us, it's going to be more than 3 times that. So again, it's the access, it is the commission structure. I would say the other piece of it with these carriers, again, them knowing they're working with us and we're connected to, hundreds of agencies out there, is that training. When they're bringing products out, they're going to step in and they're going to send their carrier reps, whether it's virtual, in the days we live in today, or, down to your office. Those carrier reps are going to be out there training you very quickly. Right away when you come on board with We Insure, because again, they know We Insure, they have the respect, we have that relationship, and so again, they're going to be out there making sure they're training up you as an agency owner with We Insure as part of that relationship we built with them.
That's key. I was going to ask that same question when Ron jumped into it. Was how do the carriers view us? And obviously, we saw some of the comments that come up on the screens. One of those working with one of our carriers, with Progressive. So I think that they see this as a disruptive force in the industry because of the fact that we have both sides of it, right? We bring in the value, to our owners and the support and the service and everything that's needed in place. At the same time, we give you access to, a multitude of different carriers, because not everything fits, right? We talked about that. It's not, if you've got a mobile home in Alabama that's, inland, but they have some tornado issues, it's very different than a $100 million home that Tony Robbins lives in Palm Beach, right? It's 2 different things. But then you also have the coverage of the cars, the exotics, the boats, the watercraft, umbrella policies. Everything is available to you, but also on such a wide scale that you have options for your clients. And so that part is great. And both of you guys work very closely. And that's one thing I think we want to go into, work very closely with our carriers. So you have the pulse of what's going on in advance. So if one of the carriers of the, let's say, 87 of them in Texas, one of those carriers comes in and says, hey, we're about to not write anything south of this area because of flood, or anything north of Dallas because of all the hail damage, but other carriers are, or we're going to have an increase of 30%. What happens in those situations?
Great question. And This is happening a lot in many states, especially here in Florida. But again, Chris, you mentioned it. It's the power of relationships, right? We always talk about what is the power of we. There's a lot of different things that we can say is the power of we, but that relationship that we have with the carriers, because again, this is not something that's developed overnight. We've proven ourselves, and it's not always good things. There's bad things that's popped up, right? That it really is about how do we respond when bad things happen, right? And so we've been able to really develop these powerful relationships with our carriers that we get, as you said, sometimes that inside information. I've gotten calls from senior levels at carriers before and said, hey, just wanted to, as a friend, just let you know that this is getting ready to change right now. So if you've got anything going on, make sure this is done by the end of the week. And we're able to push that information out to our field and say, hey, we just heard about this. Please do go ahead and get your business in if it needs to be, or if the change is going to affect you, make sure that you have alternate plans. It really allows us to plan and be more efficient in the way that we work within our agency and with our clients.
Yeah, I'd say that to your point, Chris, too. I mean, the other things we can keep an eye on too, because obviously the carriers will tell us some, but then we do a lot of research as well. One is the financial strength, of some of these carriers out there, and making sure these are strong carriers, and we're putting our clients, the insureds, with the right carriers, out there. Again, that's something we take very seriously. And then two, as Ron said, is just really that product, making sure they've got that competitive product. And so again, if something were to happen or we think may happen to some of these carriers, we're always looking at other options. What else? Who else could you write this business with? And making sure our agency owners know that. So, hey, if there is something that's going to happen to carrier X, well, here's carrier A, B, and C that is very similar, can write that product and financially strong. You should be thinking about these for your insureds out there. So again, people are more proactive, because I feel like what we see a lot in insurance is very reactive. People are thinking about it's already happened, policies are canceling, everybody's scrambling. And so now for us, it's more about, hey, again, agent for life mentality, making sure we've got that product, everybody's communicated, educated on what's going on in the marketplace, and know those carriers that they should be writing those policies with.
Well, and we all know that, the retention of those insureds, your clients out there is key, right? You want to have those, not only an insurance agent for life, but you want to make sure that the residual income is there. You want to make sure your book is very solid and built on, a solid foundation. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to make an option for your client. Like the client calls in, I don't like this anymore. It's up 15%. Put me in something different. You're the one, having that touch point, and you're the trusted advisor, as Ron mentioned, to make that call. You're out there helping them find the solutions, rather than me personally out there calling different carriers, and I have absolutely no idea, which one's better than the next. I'm just hoping to find the right thing, and it's inexpensive at the same time. But then again, what am I missing, right? So in this case, it allows you to be the expert and truly answer all those questions. And again, as Ron said, to take those calls first. Ron, you had an interesting story you said about your dad, even.
Yes.
Carrier access.
Carrier access. And it's really funny because my dad calls me up and says, hey, can you help me with my homeowner's insurance, right? And the funny thing is, and those that know, he actually is an insurance agent with another has his own independent shop, and we have 3 times more carrier access. I have 3 times more carrier access than he does, and so we've actually saved him some money and putting him in with a better coverages than he had before through a carrier that he had through his agency, right? And so, it's whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's someone you don't know, I always feel very confident that I can give them the best product. Pete, Chris, you guys both mentioned this, giving the best product for the customer. Now, our story with it, and those of you that joined us a few weeks ago when our CEO was on, he was talking about his background. He was a captive. He owned a very successful captive agency. And what was his biggest complaint? One of his biggest complaints was when the insured comes to me and says, my rate went up 10%, 15%, whatever it is, maybe 30%, 50%, whatever the percentage increase was, or for whatever reason, they didn't want to be with that carrier anymore. He had no other options for them. Right. And so the only thing he could say was, well, either you stay with this carrier or you're going to have to find a new agent. And that was always a big frustration for him and for agents like me. Even though I was an independent, I had some choice. I didn't have all the choices. So, we're over here cultivating lifetime relationships, and I can confidently, myself and our We Insure franchisees can confidently look our clients in the face and say, you know what? I can truly be your insurance agent for life. I like to use the trusted risk advisor, the household risk advisor. I can be part of that trusted inner circle, making sure that we're protecting some of the biggest assets that they'll ever own in their life, whether it's their business, whether it's their home, whether it's their auto, the toys. We can do all that. And regardless of how the markets come in and out, carriers exit markets, carriers come into markets. Typically, we're getting them first when they're entering the markets, right? But we can be successfully giving our clients the power of choice and the best available coverages to them.
Yeah, Ron, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, recently, something you and I had lived. I know a lot of our agency owners as well over the last really 2 months. There was a carrier out there, Southern Fidelity, who had some policies that were canceling at the end of June. So really 2 days ago. And so obviously a lot of work by the agents to rewrite a lot of those policies. They had the market access, were able to do that. But what I thought was interesting, and Ron, I'm sure you appreciate this too, because again, we talked a lot about it with some of our agency owners, where they picked up business. They weren't just rewriting these policies. They were getting inbound phone calls from people in their area because their agents had no options. And that was a very real situation. So, as Ron talks about these carriers exiting markets, it does stir up the market, but to be honest, for a We Insure owner and for us, it's an opportunity. It's a massive opportunity because we do have that. So again, the agents had to hustle to rewrite that business, but at the end of the day, they're actually able to grow their business by picking up some new clients. So again, sometimes a little bit of turmoil in the market is actually great for our owners because again, they've got that carrier access. They're going to find an option for that client.
And that actually happened. That actually happened to me. I actually had a client call me. It was a referral from an existing customer that I had, and said my neighbor really needs help. And the neighbor tells me and June 29th was the cancellation date for all those policies that you mentioned, Pete. And here we are. I think it was June 25th. And the insured calls me, says, I need help. I've gone to many other agencies, and it was an insured that's located in Broward County. Okay. So a very tough place to write insurance right now, and says, I've been to multiple agencies. No one can help me. They all want me to go to Citizens, which is the state-run carrier. Right. Okay. That's the only place that I'm getting quotes. And I really don't want to go to Citizens. And guess what? I actually was able to, now this doesn't always happen in this market, but in addition to saving this insured $2,000, I was able to put him in the private market with better coverages than he had on his expiring policy, which was a win-win-win in our.
Well, I can tell you, as you mentioned that, Ron, same thing happened to me. We are 100%, on the same page, because I've had the exact same experience, both on a homeowner's policy, in Florida. The same thing occurred to me. I got a referral from my from my real estate agent, said, here's a guy we use, locally in the market. He's great. And he gave me a quote. And that was fine. I compared it against a We Insure agent who said, hey, let me give you a quote, and all of a sudden I am $2,000 a year cheaper with a better carrier because the other gentleman just didn't have access to it. Now, he wasn't trying to stick it to him or anything else. That's literally the best he could do. Right. And again, he was trying to help out, but at the end of the day, there's nothing he can do about it. Right? He just doesn't have those access points that we do. And again, as a consumer, I wouldn't have known that unless I checked. And that's something I would be leery of, if I'm a referring agent or another source of mortgage broker, that I all of a sudden, had to make sure that I'm referring people that are getting the best for them, not just the best that person has. And so that's one of the keys. And the other thing, I had another experience where I sent my father to one of our agencies down in Southeast Florida. And I said, my dad has an increase coming up on his auto. And not only were they able to put him in a better policy with better coverages, but it was also 30% cheaper because, he was shopping on his own before. He didn't know what he was doing. All of a sudden, we actually got the right coverage with a better carrier. Oh, by the way, it's a national carrier. It's a major brand that he could have stumbled on himself. He just didn't. He just didn't know what to do. And so, as most of us out there as lay people wouldn't. Right? So It really becomes very apparent when you see a few of those situations that you become passionate about, okay, we have to be with the right company with the right carriers, because it not only saves our people, thousands of dollars over a period of time, but also, if something, God forbid happens, you want to make sure that they're covered the correct way with the right policy. So again, I'm very proud to be part of the company. I'm pretty excited about, what with the conversation we had today. So what I took away from today was we have a lot of carriers, right? We are constantly reviewing those carriers. We're making sure that they're all vetted. We're getting the highest tier commissions for our agents on the first run right out of the gate. And that even if something, happens, like a situation where the model works perfectly, no one likes to see that a carrier pulls out of a market or has any issues in a market. But if it does, we've got you covered. We're not only monitoring it, we're giving you choices, and we're working with our own agents to make sure that every single client is covered before that time expires. So really excited about the future of We Insure. And again, any last comments, guys?
Ron, you go ahead. I think I do have one additional thing, but Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, one other point, Chris, that I just wanted to kind of make also is the vast majority of our it's not just getting the carrier appointments, right? That's a monumental task all into its own right now, right, regardless of what state you're in. Honestly, like I said, from our experiences with other new agency owners that we're bringing on, but it's keeping the carriers, and that's one thing I want to quickly just close with or touch on is, generally speaking, most of our carriers are now, we have, some of the exceptions might be specialty carriers and things like that, but generally speaking, our carriers look at We Insure as one large organization, and the production that's done under our umbrella, basically the We Insure umbrella, counts and helps offset any personal production requirements that many of our franchisees would have to make, and that's something that when you're on the independent side or even on the captive side, you solely are responsible for all your production numbers. So let's say you have 25 carriers, and each carrier requires 5 policies a month in order to maintain your appointment. Well, if you're not writing those 5, the 125 policies minimum plus those 5 with each of those carriers, there's a good chance you're losing those appointments. Generally speaking, our carriers are going to look at our production and say, We Insure produce 5,000 policies for us, regardless of where it was produced. So that's another big advantage that our agents enjoy.
Hey, the insurance fella literally read my mind. The 2 things were appointments and production levels. But I will, just to talk a little bit more about appointments, though, just one key thing I think there is appointments across states. And so, if you're sitting in Florida, you're sitting in Colorado, you're sitting in Arkansas, we're going to get you appointed in other states. Through our national sales team, we've got those appointments and we can write anywhere. But for you, if you want to expand and try to write in other states, you're sitting in Texas and you want to write in Florida or vice versa, we can get those appointments for you, right? We're going to have the appointments in your state day one. And then if you want to start writing and expanding out your business and start writing in other states, we can get you appointed with those carriers as well. And as Ron said, that's not an easy task. If you're sitting out on your own, trying to grow your agency, you're trying to, 1, go out and sell, right, and try to grow your business. 2, you're trying to service all your current clients, and you're trying to go talk to all these carriers out there. 1, to try to get the appointments, but I would say, even as Ron said, even more is maintain those appointments, and that's 3 full-time jobs right there. And so for us, again, it's us bringing that to the table in terms of making sure you've got those appointments and maintaining those relationships for you. But man, the insurance fella, I cannot believe he just read my mind. That's amazing.
Well, as we like to say, this is the best turnkey solution, in the industry, right? That's why it's so disruptive. We bring everything to the table. We take all of the back end work kind of off your plate and allow you to focus on growing your book of business and service, not even worried about servicing your clients. We do that as well. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you have all of that wrapped up into one offering truly makes it unique. And again, we're excited to talk to folks all across the nation as we grow. But gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me. I know it's a holiday week, and we're all excited about what's coming up this weekend. So thank you very much for taking the time. And if anyone has any questions, we're out there. You can always give us a call, and we're happy to discuss your state. So have a good one.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.